I'm at the office of Harlan J. Burke, Chicago's premier dealer of ancient coins and antiquities. I'm talking about this sarcophagus, rather this chunk of sarcophagus. It dates to the 2nd or 3rd century, is made of marble, and shows a cupid with a down-turned torch, signifying death, and here in the center, Endymion. For centuries, the Romans cremated their dead. But beginning in the middle of the 2nd century, for reasons not well understood, inhumation began to replace cremation. As it did, sarcophagi became a mass-produced art form. They were made in Rome and other centers of production across the Eastern Empire, like Aphrodisias, and turned out in standard shape and with many of the same mythological scenes. Endymion was quite popular, as we'll see. There were several versions of the myth of Endymion. In the best known, he was a shepherd who pastured his flocks on the slopes of Mount Latmos, in what is now western Turkey. The moon goddess Selene, later assimilated to Artemis, saw him and loved him, and one night came down on a moonbeam and gave him a choice. He could, she said, live on as a shepherd, with his life unchanged, or he could become an immortal, with a catch. He would sleep forever and dream beautiful dreams. There are many versions of the story. In some, Endymion is a prince. In others, an astronomer who gazes at the moon every night and so draws her attention. In others still, he goes to Olympus and is punished there with eternal sleep for making a pass at Hera. But in all of them, he ends up asleep on the slopes of Mount Latmos. There, in some versions of the story, he fathers 50 daughters in his sleep with Selene, but always he ends up dreaming in his cave. The myth became famous in antiquity, as reflected in the Latin proverb, Endymionis somnum dormire, to sleep the sleep of Endymion. I think I know where the myth came from, or at least part of where it came from. Years ago, I climbed Mount Latmos, now, as I said, in western Turkey. And as I was climbing back down, the sun had set, the moon was coming up. And for a moment, the moon seemed to hover on the mountain's pinnacles. And you could imagine the goddess lingering there on the summit, looking down on her shepherd. The myth of Endymion was featured on many sarcophagi. More than 100 examples are known, including 2 in the Met. The reason isn't hard to explain. Endymion had slept forever, but lived. So, the motif implies, with the person interred inside. We don't know who was buried here. It was probably a member of the upper middle class, someone who was prosperous, but not especially important. Not an emperor, not a senator. Just a Roman who lived and died 17 centuries ago. Someone who was, in many ways, not too different from us. That's the beauty of the myth of Endymion. Not just a story, but an emblem of man's quest for immortality, as relevant now as it ever was in the Roman period.